When Ruth was young, she believed that a long marriage meant two people would grow closer with time. She thought that after raising children, after overcoming financial burdens, the couple would finally have more time for each other. But reality turned out differently. As she entered her later years, Ruth discovered that her marriage had become a kind of cohabitation contract, two people sharing the same roof, the same meals, the same bed, but no longer sharing the closeness of hearts and bodies. Every evening, they still sat across from each other at the dinner table. He asked, "Do we need to buy more rice tomorrow?" She replied, "The milk is almost gone." Their conversations revolved around small, practical details of daily life, just enough to keep the household running. But lacking the warmth that makes people feel truly connected, they still watched the evening news, still exchanged a few words about current affairs, but their eyes stayed glued to the screen, no longer turning toward each other. The most painful place was the bed, once the most intimate space, now a silent distance. Ruth would often turn her back to the wall while he lay silently on the other side. There was no gentle touch, no hand resting on her shoulder, no goodnight kiss. They slept side by side like two roommates, sharing the same space, but with souls separated by an ocean. This silence did not come from hatred. They did not fight, nor have major conflicts. On the contrary, they still cared for each other in small ways. She cooked his favorite dishes. He fixed the broken light bulb in the kitchen, but without intimacy, those acts became duties rather than the warmth of love. And it was precisely this invisible gap that made Ruth begin to feel unseen, no longer truly present in the eyes of her partner. Psychologists call this a silent unraveling, not with loud arguments, but with quiet withdrawal. When the language of the body is erased, affection has no place to be expressed. Love does not vanish instantly, but it erodes little by little, leaving behind an emptiness that is hard to fill. Ruth once admitted to herself, "I am not lonely because I lack someone beside me. I am lonely because the person beside me no longer touches me." It is a silent pain that many older couples endure. They still live together, but no longer live for each other. They have become roommates, and that is more frightening than separation itself. The human body does not survive on food and water alone. Our brain also requires a special kind of nutrition, the emotional chemicals released through intimacy. Many people assume that sex in old age is merely about physical satisfaction, but science shows that its most important impact lies within the brain. Every time two bodies touch, the brain reacts instantly. Dopamine is released, boosting focus and improving memory. This is why, after being close, people often feel sharper, more awake. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, creates trust and closeness, making two people feel deeply connected. Serotonin stabilizes mood and eases anxiety, while endorphins act as natural painkillers, bringing relaxation and happiness. These hormones cannot be bought in supplements or replaced with vitamins. They only arise when people truly connect through touch, through embrace, through physical closeness. For older adults, the presence of these hormones is especially precious, helping the brain remain flexible and slow down aging. Ruth realized this in a painful way. After many years without her husband's touch, she began forgetting small things. She would go to the market and forget an important item, or leave the stove on until the pot burned. At first, she thought it was simply old age weakening her memory. But in truth, it was the result of a brain long deprived of the chemicals linked to closeness. When the brain is not nourished by dopamine or oxytocin, it slows down, like a garden left untended. Without water or sunlight, weeds grow, flowers wither. The brain is the same without intimacy. Memory fades, emotions grow heavy, and the soul dries up. The consequences did not stop at memory. Ruth became more irritable, sometimes staying silent all day without knowing why. Her mood grew unpredictable. She lost her temper over trivial things. Worse still, she no longer felt lovable. Maybe I'm not attractive anymore, she thought. This feeling was like a small crack that gradually spread, shaking the foundation of her self-esteem. Modern science has proven that a lack of intimacy can lead to depression in older adults. not because they lack medication or nutrition, but because their brains are deprived of the happiness chemicals that only come from genuine connection with another person. In other words, the brain needs intimacy to maintain mental health, just as the body needs oxygen to breathe. When touch disappears, we not only lose physical closeness, but also deprive the brain of an essential nourishment that keeps us alert, trusting, and happy. When Ruth was in her 30s and 40s, she never doubted herself. Whenever her husband wrapped his arms around her from behind, whenever he looked at her with tenderness, she felt truly like a woman, not only in her role as mother and wife, but as a complete, valued woman. Yet after years of silence, Ruth began to hear a persistent question within herself: am I still a woman? This question was not about her aging body, the wrinkles on her face, or her graying hair. It went deeper. It was about the feeling of no longer being desired, no longer being awaited, no longer being seen with admiration. For Ruth, the absence of intimacy had not only taken away part of her marital happiness, but also stripped away part of her very identity. Many people mistakenly believe that the need to be loved, to be touched, to be desired fades with age. But psychologists affirm that this need is a fundamental part of being human, lasting from youth until the end of life. It is neither a luxury nor something to be ashamed of. On the contrary, it is what helps preserve our sense of self-worth. Ruth never told her husband directly that she no longer felt attractive. She feared he would be hurt or misunderstand. But on those long nights when they turned their backs to each other, she silently wondered, is he still here out of love, or only out of duty? Does he still see me as a woman, or just as a lifelong companion he cannot abandon? These questions were like tiny needles, piercing her heart little by little. The feeling of no longer being desired made Ruth withdraw further into herself. She rarely looked in the mirror, seldom cared about her appearance. Clothes only needed to be neat, not beautiful. She avoided expressing emotions, avoided touching her husband, afraid of rejection. That cycle only deepened her belief that she was no longer truly a woman, only an old lady growing older. In fact, many studies show that the absence of intimacy in old age can intensify feelings of uselessness and loss of identity. People stop seeing themselves as valuable, and their mental health declines as a result. A single touch, a compliment, or just a tender glance can reaffirm, I am still lovable. I am still myself. When that vanishes, the soul withers faster than the body. For Ruth, the greatest pain was not aching joints or fading memory. The greatest pain was no longer being recognized as a woman. And this is the silent tragedy faced by many older people. They lose self-esteem and identity simply because they are deprived of intimacy, which is a natural human right. There is a particular kind of loneliness that older people often dare not speak of, the loneliness that lingers even when one is not alone. It is what people call loneliness in marriage when someone lies next to you every night. Yet the distance between two souls feels as vast as an ocean. For Ruth, that loneliness was even more painful than living alone, because it existed right inside the house that once overflowed with laughter. Every morning, Ruth would hear her husband tidying the kitchen, making coffee, turning on the radio. These familiar sounds should have brought comfort, but to her, they only emphasized the quiet gap between them. She would step out, sit at the table, exchange a few words about what to buy or what to cook, and then each would retreat to their own tasks. There was no touch, no warm glance. The house seemed complete, but Ruth's spirit was hollow. At the market, she saw other elderly couples holding hands, picking vegetables together, laughing over prices. She did not feel envy, only a pang of bitterness. She asked herself, how long has it been since we last held hands at the market? How long since I last saw him smile when looking at me? Questions with no answer, yet they echoed endlessly in her heart. Loneliness inside one's own home is more frightening because it stretches over years. There is no single bad day where arguments erupt and are resolved. Instead, silence seeps in like misty rain, chilling the heart bit by bit. Affection does not disappear suddenly, but erodes until only a dull habit remains. Marriage psychology calls this parallel living. Two people maintain all responsibilities but lose emotional connection. Over time, this way of living breeds the harshest loneliness because it has no clear endpoint. People do not leave each other, yet they are no longer truly together. Many times Ruth felt like a ghost in her own home present, but unseen, untouched, undesired. At night, the loneliness became most apparent. She turned toward the wall. He turned the other way. Two bodies lay close, yet did not speak. Ruth once tried reaching out, but sometimes he was already asleep or turned away. A few attempts were enough to make her stop trying. Gradually, the bed, once a symbol of closeness, turned into the border of silent separation. Many older people like Ruth accept this as an inevitable part of aging. But in truth, loneliness within marriage is what ages the spirit fastest. It makes people doubt themselves, strips away their will to live, and sometimes it makes them grow old faster than illness does. Loneliness while living alone can be eased by friends or children, but loneliness next to one's life partner can only be healed by the courage to rekindle the intimacy that has long been asleep. Many people believe that once intimacy is gone, it can never return. But the truth is, the human body and soul have a remarkable memory, just one small signal, one flicker of light, and they begin to remember everything. For Ruth, hope did not lie in grand gestures, but in the small, simple acts she once thought were lost forever. Psychologists affirm that to revive connection, sometimes all it takes is a touch, a hand resting on the shoulder, fingers intertwined while walking, a gentle hug before sleep. These seemingly trivial gestures are the keys to restarting the chain of biological reactions that had gone dormant. When the body is touched, the brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, awakening feelings of trust, connection, and joy. Ruth once recounted that one day in the kitchen, while she was struggling with a pot of hot soup, her husband walked over and, in passing, placed his hand lightly on her back as he stepped aside. It was only a fleeting touch, but her heart stirred instantly. It had been so long since she had been touched that way. She turned, looked at him, and for the first time in years, she caught a gentleness in his eyes. That moment made her realize that not everything was lost. The revival of intimacy does not require reliving the passion of youth. No one at 70 can hold on to the fire of their 20s, but that is not what matters. What matters is presence, the courage to show each other, I still want you. I still need you. Even the smallest touch can carry that message more powerfully than 1,000 words. From a touch may come an embrace. From an embrace, a kiss. And from there, the body slowly remembers the language of love that had been forgotten. The initial awkwardness is natural. Many older adults feel shy, hesitant, even clumsy. But the more they allow themselves to try, the easier the body finds its rhythm again. More importantly, intimacy restores not only hormones and memory, but also self-esteem and self-belief. For Ruth, for the first time in years, she felt she was not merely an old woman managing meals. She was still a woman, still someone who could be desired, still someone who could bring joy to the person she loved. That feeling made her feel alive again. The way back is not far. It does not require elaborate plans or grand promises. It only needs a courageous gesture, a step beyond silence, a hand placed on a shoulder, an exchanged glance, a simple phrase, I miss you, or I want to hold you. That could be the beginning of saving a soul that has withered from loneliness. When we are young, we often think of sex as a symbol of pleasure and passion. But in later years, we come to realize that intimacy is no longer just about the body. It becomes a bridge that keeps the soul from breaking, that protects self-esteem from withering, and that prevents love from turning into a cold routine. Ruth's story is a reminder that without touch, without an embrace or a tender look, people can lose not only memory but also faith in themselves. Yet with just a hand, held a small gesture, everything can come alive again. Because the human brain and heart never forget how to love, they only need to be awakened. At 60 or 70, we no longer need to prove anything. We do not need the fiery passion of youth, nor perfection. What we need is to know that we are still wanted, still important, still worthy of closeness. That is the true secret to mental health in old age. If you are feeling lonely, even when you are not alone, remember this: it is never too late to begin again. A single touch today may be enough to save a soul tomorrow.